Killed when a white nationalist plowed into a crowd of counter-protesters. That happened 1 year ago today in Charlottesville. Dozens more, though, were injured in that. NBC Left Field reporter and producer Katie Engelhart went back to Charlottesville to find out what happened to those survivors. And for some, the future still looks a bit uncertain.
So I broke a right rib, I broke 2 parts of my spine, and I broke both legs.
If I squeeze on you down here or something?
It's right there. Not horrible, but yeah, that hurts.
On August 12th, a man drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing 1 woman. Star was one of the people he hit.
Yeah, I really don't want to do a 5th surgery. It's already really pushing it to go back to work by January, and no one's paying my rent anymore, no one's paying my electric bill. So that's really scary.
Coming up to the 1-year anniversary of the Unite the Right rally, it occurred to me that I knew very little about the specific people who were hurt that day and how they were doing. So I started making calls to Charlottesville.
I haven't worked since the accident.
Tay wasn't part of the Unite the Right counter-protest, but that day she and her sister were running errands in town, and they were detoured onto the street of the attack. They were directly hit by the driver.
I can't pay a bill. I can't work. I can't drive for too long.
Can you get the salt and pepper out?
I need help taking care of my 9-year-old child because she helps mommy now, you know?
Tay was eventually diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome. Symptoms include burning, spasms, and tremors. Do you have any kind of long-term disability insurance for your last job?
No, my job did not offer that, so I did not.
This is really common. Only around 1 in 3 American workers has long-term disability insurance to cover them if they're out of work for more than a few months.
But the GoFundMes have helped enormously. So I've been lucky.
In all, around $1.4 million was raised on GoFundMe for victims in Charlottesville. Which got me thinking, why has this become almost standard practice after terror attacks?
Money is definitely a stress factor and a fact that I don't know when I'm going to be able to make my own money again.
At the time of the attack, Tay was uninsured.
I couldn't, healthcare is expensive.
For the last year, victims have been negotiating with insurance companies and state compensation agencies for support.
The victims are stuck in dealing with a pretty complicated bureaucracy.
In the meantime, the local Charlottesville Area Community Foundation is helping Star and Tay with non-medical costs, things like food and rent.
But eventually, that money will run out.
I've budgeted enough, so I'll be okay through January.
What happens if you don't start work at the start of January?
I'm screwed. I don't know how I'm paying rent. Yeah, I have no idea. I'm very, very scared about that.
I had to get used to this body of mine because I can't do things the way I used to do them. I can't see ahead.
NBC's Katie Engelhart joins us right now. Katie, thank you for sharing that piece with us. Such a snapshot of their humanity. They are suffering economically, physically, and emotionally.
Mm-hmm. And financially. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, this is part of a larger healthcare story. I published a longer version of this report on NBC Left Field's YouTube page, and a lot of the commenters suggested that these women should be able to, buck up, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The reality is, according to federal data, about half of Americans could not come up with just $400 in the event of a medical emergency. So this is a systemic issue. Medical emergencies bankrupt Americans all the time.
We're looking at some of the video that is so tough to watch a year later. Are they still going through PTSD? No doubt.
They certainly are. Some of the victims have been getting help from a local organization, paying for mental health counseling, but that local organization is quickly running out of funding. Now, there is some federal compensation available to victims through the Victims of Crime Act, but it can be really hard to access that funding. It can take a lot of time, and a year later, it hasn't come through for a lot of the survivors. They feel like they've been left to fend for themselves.
Did they know about what's happening today? Another protest? And quickly here, if you can, 30 seconds for us. What was the reaction to that? What was the mood?
You know, they were certainly aware of it, and all of the women I spoke to had avoided downtown Charlottesville since the event. What was really striking to me is that some of the victims weren't even familiar with the name James Fields Jr., the alleged driver behind that car attack. So for them, the experience is very different. I think for us, a lot of the attention has been put on the perpetrators and not enough attention on the victim experience.
Katie Engelhardt, thank you for your reporting.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.